and Debbie are here with us from Resilience Works, and we'll get started on the agenda.
Perfect. Okay, I'm Ainsley. I called in last time, but to put a face to the voice. The voice,
Okay.
creepy voice on the phone that was listening the whole time. That was me.
It wasn't creepy till the very end when you
Right, until I
chimed
came
in
back.
with like, oh, and by the way, I'm still here.
Exactly. So first on the agenda is going back to the self-evaluation that we started last time. And Rich has offered to, it's like a tab. That's fancy. So this was available for everybody to review and edit over the past few weeks, so I'm not sure. I saw a couple additions, notes in there, but if we would like to go through it as a group before moving on to the next aspect of the agenda, which is the 72 action items, which I feel like is probably what we should push towards getting looked at, if not done, with most of our time tonight. But would love to start with the self-evaluation just to all get on the same page before we do that.
Okay, and just so, this is Mr. Travis Asbury. He's on the Verona committee.
No, I'm here as an individual.
As an individual,
As
okay.
an individual.
He works for the town.
We
also.
haven't done, we just had a meeting and we haven't done, we're a little bit behind, but I'm gonna catch us up pretty quick.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. I'm gonna pull it up for myself too. So, I guess my main question then is, are people feeling that there's more you'd like to talk about or add or go over from this document?
I think that we should consider raising the waterfront a little bit more so that future floods will not flood the waterfront, and to make sure that no commercial or residential get impacted by this.
Okay, so an issue about the waterfront that
Yeah.
people brought up last time, and that is something that you feel should be addressed or improved in long-term, short-term,
Yeah.
not necessarily something that is already doing well. Okay.
Okay, I guess I'm a little behind. I was under the impression from our meeting, maybe I'm in the wrong meeting, that the money had to be spent and earmarked for green energy improvement. So that would have nothing to do with the waterfront, raising the waterfront.
So, in terms of the list of community actions, underneath the Community Resilience Partnership, there's, I believe, A through H in terms of strategies, and there is strategy C and G, mainly do address like energy efficiency and clean energy, but the rest of the strategies also address things like modernizing buildings, future
So anything that
transportation.
could potentially impact like a climate change, like seawater rise, it all kind of bundles in.
So we can go through each of the actions individually if that would be helpful.
No,
but
I mean, I don't wanna take up
no,
everyone's time.
we're
was just
going to
trying
be going
kinda-
over them
No,
eventually.
I'm feeling what you were just
Yeah,
saying.
so
That actually makes sense.
there is a lot about clean energy within there, but there is also a lot that's more focused on the environment, protecting natural areas, and also like flooding, watershed, water quality in relation to impacts of climate
Protecting
change.
infrastructure,
Yes.
Right,
things of
Yep.
that nature.
yep.
So that
definitely.
does fall under the list of actions.
So, I would be a big proponent of anything that has to do with protecting the safety of the citizens anyways.
Yep.
And the
First and
waterfront,
foremost.
raising the level
That's kind of what that said.
really is a safety priority.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I kind of talked a little bit about with the other gentleman that came to visit us last week was, you know, I make no bones about it. I'm not for wind power, okay? Just flat out think it's a complete waste of money. Solar, I think, has its place. The infrastructure, everybody's got a roof, everybody's hooked to the power grid.
Mhm.
Why are we clearing a whole bunch of land unnecessarily when we could be putting solar panels on public buildings, residential buildings that qualify? You know, now they're starting to look at this and saying, okay, we got $7 billion to spend. Now let's do the right thing that makes sense. When that should have been done first, and it should have been more like $10 billion. And then, I mean, me just being the person that I am, like I said, I just kind of look at all the angles and say, hey, you know, the more people that we put solar on their roofs, the better it makes sense for keeping our grid safe. And for one thing, you know, if you have little power plants everywhere versus having a big one here, a big one here, a big one here, and you're relying on big energy in small spaces versus, I don't know if anybody probably saw it, but Texas had like a huge, you know, a huge hailstorm, and they had like acres of solar panels that were destroyed. So we're talking like, you know, a lot of new infrastructure that was just destroyed.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a huge, it's gotta come out of somebody's pocket.
Right. So it sounds like maybe we should transition to talking about the community actions if everyone feels like
Okay.
we're pretty on the same page about what the town is and isn't doing in terms of protecting infrastructure or energy, etc. So if we're good with the self-evaluation,
Can I just touch on
yes.
his remark there? I think one of the obstacles for putting it on the rooftops, et cetera, versus where we're seeing them put up in fields is the labor-intensive side of, maybe workforce driven.
Right. Oh, definitely. I mean, making more jobs is definitely, it's on my priority
But
list.
what I'm saying is, for them to erect where they are, like down on Route 3, you see them, they may be able to put that type of a facility up with a lot less labor than putting them on the rooftops and buildings and retrofitting and,
Right.
but that's just speculation on my part, but
Right.
that might be an angle.
Before we move on, though, there's a big chunk of the self-evaluation that we haven't done.
Okay.
So I'm not sure, it's the stuff that Rich was scrolling through. Is that something, Rich, that would make more sense
Like only halfway through it.
to get?
So I
feedback?
will just say that at least my understanding of the self-evaluation, and feel free to chime in here, but this is how I understood from Alan and my own experience thus far working with it, is that this isn't necessarily something that has to be like perfectly completed or like submitted in any capacity. It's more for the committee and community to have a springboard into looking at the list of community actions and establish where you're at as a community before moving forward. So there, like, it is a longer document, and there are a lot of questions that might, in my personal opinion, be a little bit too specific, and we could kind of get down a little bit of a rabbit hole as a group discussing them, I think. And so if that's something, if people are interested in going more thoroughly through these questions in the interest of all being on the same page, then I would say all for it. In terms of, it seems like people are feeling strongly about the community actions and kind of like understanding the strategies and more like how can we actually get access to the funding. So I do want to allocate a significant amount of time for that, but obviously if people feel strongly about the self-evaluation, I don't want to take that away from anybody.
I'm fine. I just thought they were really important discussion points,
Okay.
but I'm happy to have those at different times. Like I can access Rich and just I'm just curious to learn where we are with some of these plans, but it doesn't need to take up time at this meeting. I think you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's more of like a personal wanting to
Just
understand
a personal
and get
wanting
those
to
plans.
understand
Okay.
some
I'm
of the
on
things.
the same page, a lot of stuff on the second half. I tried looking at the town website and I'm having troubles with things loading. So I wasn't, I wanted to read more about like what disaster plans are already in place and, which ones need to be worked on.
Okay.
So from a process point of view,
Mm-hmm.
I think it may make sense for us individually to look at these questions and provide information terms of these 72, did you say? Uh, items that are eligible for funding,
Mhm.
and looking at the amount of funds, the funds are not enough to accomplish huge projects. The
Multiple.
funds are enough to get something started. Now, one of the strategies in funding projects, public projects, is to use state funds to leverage federal funds and use federal funds to leverage state funds and so forth. That's a common strategy for getting
Mhm.
larger amounts of funds to be able to do things. Raising the walkway is not a $125,000 project, for
Right.
example. So a question that I have and that I will try to pursue on my own, but you may have some
Mhm.
answers to this, is what, if you know of federal funding sources that this money could leverage, might help guide our thinking on which of these 72 projects we might want to engage in.
Right. I will say on the spreadsheet on the right side, there is the additional resources aspect, and some of those are more federal funds, like some of the FEMA and CDC, Department of Energy. Some of those are federal funding, not just state of Maine. But I don't want to fully answer that question because I don't have all the information.
Again, process oriented. This is our second meeting.
Mm-hmm.
We had a general discussion last time and threw out ideas and kind of felt out the situation. There's a zillion things here that
Right.
$50,000 or $150,000 is not going to do. I think we really need to focus or have a discussion about what our priorities are,
Yeah.
Right.
as opposed to
Yes.
doing all this stuff.
Yes.
Because this is our second meeting, and I heard no specific consensus the first time on, we've got different ideas.
Yeah.
And
Right.
different thoughts, but we've gotta pick out somewhere that are
We were
tangible and
asked to
reasonable.
go through the document and sort of prioritize. I don't know if anyone had a chance to do that. I know Steve and I did, but I,
Was this sent on an email? Is that how this was?
Yeah, so,
I didn't get it.
sorry, this resides in a, I think I might only have a phone number for you. I'm not sure if
Okay, but
I can-
I may have failed to give you my email. I don't know.
I'll check.
Did you get something from me today? With the agenda?
I don't think so. I didn't.
I can check if
Okay.
you're on the list that he
I
sent it
was
to.
working, so I probably wasn't.
Oh, good. I do think, though, in terms of process and acknowledging that it's the second meeting, like I said, I obviously want to give everybody an opportunity to speak about the things that you're passionate about. Clearly, there's a lot of positive and complicated as well emotions about the town and what's being done and the
Yeah.
environment and infrastructure, et cetera, and that's all really valuable to share. But in terms of process, I think the main intention of going through the 72 actions is to kind of narrow it down to 3 to 5 big ones that you are in consensus about, that you would like to pursue and believe that is a priority. I do think that, like, you're right, you can't do 5 of those things with $50,000. That's not realistic, and that's not necessarily what we're asking you to do. It's more, as a group, you had a ton of great ideas last time, but how can we narrow those down to 3 to 5 that you feel are really, really important as a town? And you've been waiting for a while. So
No, that's
go
okay.
ahead.
I'm glad Mr. Chapman brought that up. When I went down through that, I saw a bunch of the bullets off to the right where federal funds might
Mhm.
be earmarked for it.
Right.
But I also don't wanna get, like, maybe trapped isn't the correct word, but when you look at leveraging other funds, let's be honest, the other funds are still us.
Right.
It's tax dollars that are funding those. So I think we need to be responsible about, just because this program is out there, where's that money coming from? And
Comes from all of our
it has to be
pockets.
sustainable. And like you mentioned, let's prioritize, let's there were a lot of those programs, and I think maybe Rich might have more experience with what a lot of those may be and how practical they might be to apply to our town, but
Yeah, one of the things that I thought about, and I only put one note, I couldn't have like a top 5
That's
quickly, but I had sort of a top one, and it was raising the waterfront for a few different reasons.
Which was probably under G,
The
if you
walkway,
wanna scroll
I mean.
down.
Because we've got federal money already earmarked to work on the docks and
Mhm.
to address some of the damage already done. The PPI initiative was just voted in. So we have these 3, potentially, if we added raising the waterfront, we have these 3 projects that would sort of in tandem be improving one big area. So it sort of would be low-hanging fruit. We would not only be addressing property, walkability, and all of that of our waterfront. It has impacts on economic development, it has impacts on tourism, impacts on recreation. As Ben pointed out, he's a walker.
safety.
And safety and property protection, as well as if the PPI initiative goes forward and we're successful in that grant, as well as the federal grant that that you were successful in getting. I just think it's almost low-hanging fruit for the near term. So that's why that got my number 1.
Okay.
I agree.
Yeah.
So item A9, Ainsley, when they talked to BPI's bid, the Village Partnership Initiative, the town just had
Sorry.
its vote.
No, you're okay.
The town had its vote yesterday, and the citizens supported this measure.
Mhm.
So the town is going to do a 50-50 match on project engineering to leverage through a raise grant through the federal government, where the federal government pays 80%, Maine DOT covers 10%, and the town of Bucksport covers 10%. So that would already incorporate A9.
Okay. Great, thank you
You
for
guys
the
have
background.
a warming/cooling area for
That's
like an
number 1 thing on my
emergency? Because this is one of the things I was kind of bringing up on the town of Verona. Like I said, I'm here as an individual, not as a Verona representative. But, you know, my thing was, next week, I don't know if you all have seen it, I'm sure you have. Next week it's going to be pretty friggin' hot. And not everybody can afford to run AC units. I don't know, everybody probably realizes that elderly people, you know, when it gets really extremely hot or really extremely cold, are more vulnerable than everybody else.
Absolutely.
Okay? My thought was, if the town of Verona wanted to do something with this money, it's only so much money. So our town hall needs, obviously, some, 1970 something is when it was built, and it looks like it's still in 1970. So we have enough space in there, and we have heat pumps and stuff like that, that we could put it out there to the public, hey, you know, if you're an elderly, you're on oxygen, you're whatever. If we lose power for an extended period of time due to a solar flare, EMP, knocking out the power grid, God forbid, I mean, there's a number of certain things that could happen. Natural disasters, microburst, we've had one of those. Making sure that
Osprey
everybody-
building a nest on a power line.
Right, yeah. So making sure that everybody knew and put it out there and say, hey, you know, if your heat's not working, if your AC's not working, and there's enough people that need it, and you can't, like, your family, you know, some people don't have family that's right there to take them in and take care of them.
Right.
So turn our town hall into a space where people could, you know, plug in to use their oxygen that isn't reliant on the grid, because we have a generator, because we have backup solar panels. Cool people if they needed to be cooled because their houses don't have AC in them. Heat people if they needed to have a warming shelter because it's too cold outside and they can't afford to heat themselves.
Right.
I mean, you need a bigger space to do that, and I know we're little over there compared to Bucksport, but do you guys have anything, like, I know the high school or something, the gymnasium obviously could be, you know, converted if it was an emergency or anything like that, but do you have anything put in place for anything like that?
I think it's the
It's the
The
school.
Miles Lane
It's
School.
Miles Lane School.
It
We
is
have,
Miles Lane School.
yeah, in Orland, in winter, there's a warming center.
Yep.
As well as in Bucksport, it's the Miles Lane School.
No, I think that that's a really good point, and as Rich was starting to pull up, I think some of the actions that I thought of when you were speaking just now were H5. So, and I know a big thing this round for the Maine Climate Council is considering priority populations and vulnerable populations, specifically older individuals. I mean, as we saw this past winter, not a heat event, but
Right.
when everyone went out with power, those
Several
were
times.
right. So I think H5, also if you scroll down to H7, that could be something to consider. Like if a large part of the town population doesn't have access to air conditioner or something like that, then H7 could be something that y'all might think is a priority. And then also F15, which is more of a community-based kind of peer-to-peer program instead of necessarily like a town like coming in and making a purchase. But at least from what I've seen so far, it seems like you guys have good connections here and good community. So F15 could be something to consider as well.
So, I like your point, because I think if we're gonna do anything, the community taking care of the community,
Mm-hmm.
and the peer-to-peer is a great idea, but unless there's some structure to,
Right. Then it
then
can't
some
be
things
effective.
can fall through the
Mhm.
cracks, and
Yes.
we know we have an aging population within town, and very vulnerable. So, before we look at luxury items, we should look at
How many people can we make
necessities and how can we improve
happy
our.
with the smart?
I am totally with that, but it's also with the poor. I don't just look at elderly but the poor, if you're talking about community resilience as time goes along, the rich are getting rich and the poor are getting poorer in my lifetime.
Amen.
And if you're going to talk about climate change affecting people, it affects the vulnerable who are elderly and without funds or whatever that is. Through no fault of their own, through fault of it, I don't care. That, I think that is something that I would like to think as a priority
Mhm.
for a community, to take care of its people.
Sure.
And the state does define under priority populations. It includes low-income households, older adults, climate frontline communities, et cetera, et cetera. They have a pretty robust definition and list of who falls under priority populations. So in terms of the vulnerable populations, was that in H7 or H5? I'm not sure. But
One great thing about this state, and we all know it, we've been through ice storms, we've been through
H5, yeah.
everything. Neighbors will help neighbors in time of need. I mean, everybody, if someone on the island doesn't have power for a while, someone will say, hey, I got a shower, guest bathroom, come on in, use it, feel free. I got a guest bedroom, we've all seen that before, we're great at that, but we've also had like a 30% increase in, people moving to our smaller community, and in the summer it's more like 70%. Granted, it's a short period of time, but I don't know if anybody's tried to get in and out of Hannaford lately or the light, but wow.
I think unfortunately our society's gotten fairly cynical, and our willingness to help one another has kind of fallen a little bit to the wayside and could stand to be reset.
So,
Absolutely.
Can I
in the
just-
corner, yes.
I think it's really important for a warming center or a cooling center to also be able to be known and utilized
Mhm.
in a disaster, not just as those two things, but a place people know they can go when stuff doesn't go quite right and you need a place to go.
Okay, so it sounds like people are definitely craving some kind of center of some type for individuals throughout the community
I
that's
think
known
they
and
already
designated.
We already
That's
exist
right.
that part, we just.
There's a
I'm
couple,
confused.
there's a couple things I just wanna clarify. The peer-to-peer thing exists and it's strong in Bucksport. The warming centers, we have more warming centers closer to our town than a lot of other towns in Maine. So we have a 30-bed capacity warming center in winter. We, with weather-related situations, we have a Miles Lane School to use. But if people are generally falling on hard times, if that's what you were meaning.
I mean, if you're referring to Miles Lane as, like, also a disaster center, I don't think that's known well.
Right, but it's known when the disaster happens. I wonder, maybe, yeah.
Well, I mean,
But
the
how do you
Times
get that
report-
information out there
exactly.
if everything's
Right,
shut
it
down?
needs to be widely known
You know?
Like
before,
a preemptive strike.
like,
Right.
somebody doesn't need to
Yeah.
be notified that it's there when disaster strikes,
Yeah.
they know that's.
Right,
So maybe
where
it's
it's at.
more about communicating and informing the community than it actually is about establishing anything.
yeah, because
Okay.
that problem would exist anyway, unless you have a 24/7 center open
Right.
with no events. You still have to jump over that communication hurdle for a space.
So in
Start
terms,
with publicizing what we have.
Yeah, and the
then-
other part is there's a lot of duplication on warming center money that wouldn't necessarily have to come from a community resilience grant. Warming center monies flow out.
So just out of curiosity, what's you guys have backup generator if it's a power situation? Is it gas, propane?
I don't know. I don't know the
So that's
technical-
where my little
Yeah,
wheels turn to, like, you know, should everything shut down, you can't get the propane truck out there. You know, there's,
Yeah.
you know, say God forbid we go a month before, I mean, we're the last on the list. They're gonna focus on the populated areas before they're gonna come to the little
Right.
towns. I mean,
Yeah.
Bangor, you know, the bigger, I mean, Bucksport's bigger, but I mean, you know, if something bad really happened, you know, they're gonna
Yeah.
focus on the big areas and then work their way
Yeah.
down to the smaller areas.
I think we've kind of identified why it might have been important to finish the evaluation. So
Right.
we understood what was here, what's in place. But not at this meeting, but I think that's why I was so stuck on that, because I think we need to understand what's in place in an emergency. What's the method of communication for that? And without having answered that, this is a little bit more challenging, I think.
okay.
But not that, I don't suggest we do it now, but some of the stuff is existing and communication is the
Okay.
challenge
Just
then.
think
So-
about it from like a homework
Yeah,
perspective.
Right, because I'm
Yeah.
I'm just wondering in terms of like how we can support you all. This is mainly the best way that at least I know how to be able to kind of funnel that into something productive in terms of the process. I 100% agree that you guys should have more conversations about that and that it's important to evaluate where you are as a town. And if everyone agrees that that would be a good use of the meeting time to go through the self-evaluation, then that's what you agree upon. I just want to make sure that I'm best supporting you with the time that we have. Yes.
I was jumping into the 72 actions at the last meeting, but I'm also a person that reads the first 2 chapters of a book and then jumps and reads the last chapter because I can't stand to not know what's going on. So here I am, and I've already made my decisions of what I want to have happen.
Good.
Want me to share them?
Yeah.
What's up with G1 and G2?
Great. I would love to talk about it.
Because conduct a vulnerability assessment for critical community infrastructure that includes the climate hazards to which infrastructure assets are exposed.
Yeah.
And how the intensity and likelihood will change over time, the susceptibility to damage or failure given the location, design, age. Like, would this cover the waterfront walkway?
So
Like,
it is
does
a-
this cover that? Is what I
It is a strategy that other towns have chosen, is conducting that vulnerability and like impact assessment essentially, because I think that opens up more opportunities of where to go from there and is a little bit more vague in the wording perhaps, that allows for more tailoring to individual communities, whereas a lot of the other actions can be really, really specific and may not apply in your scenario. So G1 is definitely an option.
Is that a study? Is G1 a study?
No, so you can, at least how I know that another town has done it, is they essentially used the money to hire a firm of some sort, I'm not, a consultant.
An engineering consultant.
Right, to conduct that assessment and then report
would be
back
a
to the
study.
town.
Yeah.
So you pay,
Alan mentioned,
you pay some money
Mm-hmm.
that we write a grant for to do a study. Is Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Can I-
I mean, that's
And
an
that's,
option.
that's,
In the town of Blue Hill and the town of Brooksville
yeah,
have applied for a grant. Because it was a collaborative grant, it was $125,000. At the same time, the town of Surrey was also looking to do a vulnerability assessment. So the three towns pooled their money and they hired a consultant to do the vulnerability assessment. And that's what they're going through now.
Can I throw
But
something
that
out
was
there?
the direction they chose.
Can I
Mhm.
just piggyback on that?
Hey, Don, can you listen?
I think as far
I'm
as
sorry, Steve.
a study or an assessment goes, I think within our town and many of the people in here, I think we have an intelligence level enough that we can prioritize our own and do our own assessment.
Right.
And utilize funds towards something more.
And I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just explaining that that's an option.
So may I ask you, ma'am, if, once the study is accomplished, and they identify what they've identified, then what do you do with that product?
Well, I think that they would, I haven't actually been to the end of that, but what I foresee happening is, for example, they may identify culverts that they know can't sustain
In
the
particular.
stormwater. And then they apply to DOT or some of the other funding sources that actually go into culverts. Or they may look at wharfs or piers or something like that
Sure.
that need to be sustained.
So they use this study, excuse the word, to assess what's there and what they need, and then they use that as a jumping off point
Mhm.
to maybe access more money.
That's right. Yeah. Or to develop maybe a long-term plan, so that over a number of years, they will look at investments for these various infrastructure needs.
And most, I think also, Don, most of those federal grants for infrastructure would require some
An
kind of
assessment.
assessment
Mhm.
before you're even in competition.
I'm
Yeah.
reacting a little bit to the many
Study.
assessments and studies that have been on this downtown thing. We ought to do, and we pay $250,000 for this or that. That's just an old dog that I would rather see something tangible actually happen to some
fair.
poor outfit
That's fair.
or something,
Yeah.
as opposed to given some, that's my own, unless I can be, that's where I am.
Well, that's why there's 72 actions.
So would you be in favor of more of, I guess best way to label it be a grassroots assessment? Where if
Not
it has-
necessarily a consulting, but
If it has to do with culverts and road infrastructure, perhaps we include our public works director in his expertise in the area. In any other areas, we leverage the people that we already have in town and prioritize it within town. And then if we think we need help outside, then you move forward and you actually have a plan. We
Well,
develop our own plan.
Referencing G1, we have a SHIP grant that I'm in the process of right now that's assessing the waterfront walkway, and it includes rerouting the walkway, and I have a meeting with the property owner Monday to discuss that as well. So we're kind of already doing the G1 through
In
another
that
grant,
area.
utilizing this grant with that grant for the final product, I think is where Don's going. These two grants are coinciding. If this committee decides the waterfront walkway resiliency is the most important because it impacts recreation, tourism, retail, housing,
Environment.
Yeah,
the
lots.
environment, that
Yeah.
entails all that. G1's already in process. They're coinciding at the same time, and there was a reason why both grants were applied at the same time. So when you go for that money, we've done this as a community, we've done this as the report, show us the money.
So we've done our own grassroots assessment
It's finishing,
and it's moving forward
yes.
in that process.
Yes, matter of fact, I gotta make updates to the website and put the survey from that grant on the website as well.
I'm also looking at the list, at Debbie's notes from last meeting in terms of what you identified, were big issues, and I was wondering about some of the actions under strategy B, and then also some of the actions under strategy E. We haven't necessarily talked about it yet this much this meeting, but in terms of energy efficiency, that was highlighted last meeting, and then also safety of drinking water and water runoff. I'm not sure if that's still something that people are feeling strongly about, but I would encourage us to look at some of the E and B actions in terms of moving forward with those
I think we
priorities.
earmarked the water and the runoff issue as a high priority.
Okay.
So I noticed within there's about energy efficiency and such.
Mhm.
Now, if I were a young 20-something-year-old trying to build my house and having to put 4 inches of insulation around it at $400 a sheet or whatever that's up to now, and make my house so tight that because it meets a requirement that we've stated,
Mhm.
we almost need to be very cautious of pricing, putting plans in place with a goal of efficiency,
Mhm.
but kind of being short-sighted in it. And
If it makes you feel any better, I can't afford to live anywhere, so
but
it's
if-
not
Make
just
any of us
Bucksport.
feel
No, it is.
But what I'm-
Right.
I guess what I'm getting at is
No, I understand.
if you look at the updated building codes, et cetera, and you've gotta put 2 inches of 4-inch
Right.
insulation around your foundation on the outside and sheathe it in, double the insulation on
Mhm.
the outside, insulate the roof.
Right. I will
There
say.
also is a practical price point
Mhm.
we need to be cautious of, and some of these really clearly state, should we put into place policies and codes?
Right. I will say that in terms of long-term versus short-term, not to kind of like preach my own personal belief, but seems like kind of a vibe here, so I'm just going for it. Long-term, it's also going to be expensive to continue to adapt to the increasing impacts, and so I think that there's got to be some sweet point in there with like cost benefit analysis of either you set this code and this policy and it costs that much to do it up front, or down the line you're having to repair your house every however many years and update your heating and air conditioning, this, that, and the other thing, and that's also going to be expensive. So yes, because I do think that that's absolutely something, vulnerable populations and priority populations, and the cost of that is absolutely something to consider in terms of setting that code or policy or whatever it may be. I think in general, I would err on the side of like, it's better to like dive into that energy efficiency if that's something that people feel strongly about, knowing that the cost of just adapting down the line is going to continue to worsen. And I think that's also probably a decision that will be made later on in the process, and I'm not really sure how that decision gets made, like at what point do you set that code.
Like
But-
mandatory EV or solar
Mhm.
hookup on any new construction, I think is,
Absolutely.
Right.
Mhm.
I'm saying that I disagree with it.
Okay.
I would say it
Strictly
needs to happen if we're
because
gonna go green.
the price of it now,
Mhm.
we have to make things affordable for people to build currently.
I think that kind of speaks to a lot, like that's, I feel this sort of similar about, like this grant, if we're thinking of impact on citizens, and the biggest impact on citizens as a percentage of our population, for example, the EV charging stations, what percentage of our population would be impacted by having more EV stations? What percentage of our population would
I
be
think-
impacted about from, and sort of, I think that's sort of just an element we could, look at when we're applying for monies, like what's our biggest value add
Mhm.
to people? It's hard because you're thinking value add to climate resilience writ large, but for impact in Bucksport
Mhm.
or surrounding towns, if we partner with towns, you know, it's just hard to discern which is the best, for me anyway, which is the best route.
He's been patient.
Yes.
Yeah,
I don't like to interrupt, so
that's okay.
I'll wait till I'm called on. Here's the thing. If we think in terms of our locals, you're on the right track, fine. Not everybody needs an EV charger, because not everybody owns an EV, and that's fine and good. We need tourist money
Mhm.
if we're going to keep the town growing. The tourists, the metropolitans, are renting EVs.
Exactly.
That stuff is coming to town. Where are they supposed to charge these things?
But that would be kind of up
Which
to
I'm
your
okay with
Airbnbs
Okay,
that they
fine.
rent.
And all
you
we're
know.
saying is if you have a dedicated outlet that you can convert to a 220, you're set. Most EVs will come with a little plug-in thing, you stick it in the wall, and it acts as the level 2. That's
Just
done.
takes longer.
For
Huh?
the,
It just takes longer.
It takes as
Yeah.
long as these level 2s over here
Yeah.
along the waterfront.
for the criteria for the grant though, which disadvantaged community would that be addressing?
That's a good question. I'm not gonna speak on anything I'm ignorant on. So
Yeah.
I would
I'll leave
say,
the smart people to discuss where the money's coming from. I'm saying there must be some sort of initiative or financial umbrella under which people can be incentivized to just dedicate an outlet for EV charging. Just this is your little EV plug-in. Which
Yeah.
Now, I'm
Yeah,
a
I'm
little,
in the-
I'm a
I'm in
little
the-
ignorant on the EVs, but I also believe that when you buy an EV, to my knowledge, because being a mechanic on an oil rig, I learned all about batteries. I actually put in my own solar system on my house. It runs 12 volt, so I'm pretty fluent with all the solar stuff. I've done all my homework. I could converse with anybody on it on any point. When you're dealing with power in EVs, you can charge batteries really fast, and you decrease the efficiency of the battery, or you can charge it slow, and you can basically let it trickle charge. And
We're
so,
kinda
but you
talking
can,
like,
but
that's
you
like,
can do it right
just
from
wanting
your
to
house.
redirect us back to.
Right, but you can do it right from any
Yeah.
house. What I'm saying is you
Mhm.
don't need anything special to do it. They have an adapter plug. that
every
will
new
plug
every
into
new
a-
EV comes with its own one that you can just stick in the wall, and if you wanna take 3 days to
No, it's not 3
charge it.
days. It should do it in 24
Okay,
hours.
so to
Yeah,
answer
go
your question about what vulnerable populations it would impact, in terms of the actions for energy efficiency, it doesn't necessarily have to fall under, for all of these actions, unless it explicitly says so, you don't necessarily have to back it up with this vulnerable population needs it. It's just something I think to take into consideration for equity purposes, and also as a smaller community, that's clearly something that's important.
Yeah, and what's also been important, and you've said a lot, is protecting our citizens.
Right,
And
right.
so it's sort of, I was just trying to put it all in that
No,
box.
absolutely,
It seems like people
absolutely.
are really just concerned about
Yes.
our neighbors, and I was just trying to.
No,
Yeah.
I think if anything, I appreciate that all of you feel so strongly about this, because a lot of times you get into situations where people are very apathetic, and I sense that is not necessarily the issue with this community.
No,
So
that's not this.
that's fantastic, and I know you say let the smart people talk, but all I've heard from over here is experience and knowledge, and that is equally as valuable as all the experience and knowledge that sits up here as well. So, in terms of highlighting something that's really important, it seems like moving forward, exploring more about this EV pathway
Yep.
in particular under energy efficiency is something that people are interested in discussing or
I'd be interested in discussing it. I'm
Okay.
also interested in the biggest bang for the buck
Right.
for the population that needs it.
Mhm.
Which I think
To
is
de-
to both of
to-
your points. Who is it actually
Yeah,
benefiting?
the bottom line is they're making the things more affordable now.
Mhm.
That
Yes, they are.
the big automotive companies are pushing these things because the government's pushing these things.
Mhm.
So you're getting huge rebates. These things are as cheap as gas cars now. All right, these things are not. It's not that the Tesla stuff from 5-6 years ago. It is now everybody. It's mainline,
Yep.
mainstream.
Yeah.
So the
In the
more
cities,
those become popular,
perfect
because it's
sense.
the
Yeah.
it's the latest
Not so much.
teacup chihuahua in the pocketbook. It's the latest thing. It's trending,
I
and
support the technology, it wouldn't get my vote for the use of this grant.
So another big thing about batteries, they don't like the cold.
Well,
We
it
all know
depends
it.
on the
Anybody that has.
Exactly.
different chemistry. Let's not discuss the
Right.
details of the technology. That's a complex topic.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, for factual information,
Yes.
population of 4,944, 5 EV chargers in the town. Facts.
Okay.
So
Exactly.
that's,
And I just wish that we had DC fast chargers, for those that would like to spend a little time but not too much time. I don't know if that follows,
yes, I can speak to that as well.
'Cause
We have no fast charging in town.
yeah, we have a
Right.
lot of
So
people.
so you're looking at an hour for 10% of your battery. Okay, an hour for 10%
So again,
of your
it's
battery.
sounding like that's something that is important, but not necessarily something that everybody agrees this grant should support. Is that true?
I think it's very important.
It's a very
I
good-
wouldn't want to apply for a grant for 5 uses out of 4,000 people in the town. Or not 5 uses, but just,
Mm-hmm.
for me, I would like to see us do something that had a bigger impact.
Okay.
And particularly marginalized people buying electric cars. There's a lot of barriers to access for that before we even get to EV,
Marginalized people can't buy cars.
period.
Well, there's a,
They-
Nailed it.
I'm sorry, there's a program in Herman, California called Green Materials. It's an electric car ride sharing program. And low income and people that are disadvantaged, they usually get rides. Like, let's say if Ben wanted to give somebody a ride down to Hannaford's or to a doctor's appointment,
Mhm.
it'd be kind of cool to incentivize DC fast chargers in this town, to have, people that drive electric cars like Ralph or Ben. If someone needed a ride to a doctor's appointment in town, I don't know if it would be for free or if it would be for a nominal fee, but I think it'd be kind of cool to kind of copy that little program itself. Because more people are interested in electric cars and they can afford them, so
Mm-hmm.
even if they can't drive a car, they can get a ride from Ben or Ralph or John or Henry.
Right. So tapping into that community aspect in terms
Okay,
of
yeah.
new programs. Yeah.
So I'm continuing to look
Mm-hmm.
through this
Thank you.
stuff here, and it seems like just in the people in this room, all of whom signed up to be here, we have a plethora of different levels of knowledge and information and experience with this stuff. So one of the things that I was looking at here also is about creating education, outreach, and engagement
Which is
for
under
folks.
G?
It's H.
H, okay.
It's under H in engaging people.
Mm-hmm.
Creating a climate change education, outreach, and engagement program focusing on mitigation and adaptation for residents. And I think that that would be a really great thing. Do I want to spend $50,000 on that? No.
Well, and
No, but I think it would be a great part to whatever
Mhm.
Yeah,
actual tangible action we try to do.
Right.
yeah.
Is an educational piece, because I think we all, I mean, I don't know, because I generally have like-minded people around me. I think we all understand that the climate's changing now. I think we're all like, we all get that.
Gulf of
Um,
Maine's warming faster than any other body
If
of
you
water
live
on
on
the
the
planet.
waterfront, you know it because the
exactly.
water is
Now,
on your
if
front
you
steps.
were a bird watcher, you've known it for a long
during
time.
Right.
So, yeah, and,
Or
but I
someone
don't, but we, again, we're all people who signed up to be in this room, so we have a different level of understanding. I
That's
don't
true.
think that that's true across the board.
Definitely, and I think in terms of
And what
considering
some of those
priority.
impacts might be down the
Yeah.
road, and, what steps we can take now to make things.
And I will
get
say
better.
that including the emphasis on education definitely aligns with, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this or not, the way that Maine Climate Council and Maine policy is trending. A focus on education, outreach, and engagement is going to be a huge part of the climate action plan that's getting released, and has been a huge part of a lot of conversations that have happened at a state level. Recognizing this is a state grant, I don't think it could ever hurt to be pushing for education, outreach, and engagement, especially if you're considering those priority and vulnerable populations who maybe the issue isn't necessarily that the infrastructure doesn't exist, but people don't know about it, or people see the changes but don't necessarily understand where they're coming from or what they're supposed to do about it. And I think that you're right that we all are coming from these backgrounds with a lot of knowledge and information, whatever level that might be, that we know to an extent like how we can address the problem, whether that be like you have a lot of knowledge about EVs, or you have nature and environmental knowledge, or you're focused on safety, or like all of those things are important, but not everybody has that same knowledge. And so even that basic education and outreach emphasis can be huge in getting the community to a more equitable place.
I think a lot of these things, and that one included, there are pipelines, organizations, things that already exist that these things can be incorporated into without necessarily needing a grant to do them, or like this one is very important, and I think that there are definitely things already in play that can boost this, and a lot of things on the list are.
Yeah, which I think is at least my goal and our goal in terms of narrowing it down to that 3 to 5 is that you shouldn't have to decide on the only beneficial thing for your community. That would be absurd. So really getting it down to those 3 to 5 main things that you all agree are key issues. And I'm not necessarily saying that all of you have to feel as strongly as each other about every single one of them, but from there, like, if one of them's less important, maybe that's somewhere where you explore federal funding instead of using it for this grant. Or if education can encompass some of these other things, like if education as a facet of climate change can incorporate outreach programs about electric vehicles or energy efficiency or whatever it may be, then that gives you other opportunities. So I think that H2 is really great because it's one of those that has more vague language that could kind of branch out and apply to this community in a way that maybe some of the other ones don't.
I have a question for Tracy and Rich. Is the committee solely for this grant, or is there a plan to sort of continue and maybe do a lot of these things that don't necessarily need a grant down the road after this? Because I mean, if that's the case, I think that can kind of help streamline thinking into,
Definitely.
you know, what do we do now?
So the council voted for the committee piece in relation to this process, but that's not to say that the town couldn't bring it up for discussion again as sort of a more standing work. Am I correct in that, Rich?
Yeah, because the grant that we got supports the work that Ainsley and Debbie and Alan are doing for their time and effort.
Yeah.
If the committee were to choose afterwards that, okay, we decided on 3 to 5 goals and the 50,000, or in conjunction with another community, 125,000, we want to set it because all 3 towns believe we should each have DC fast chargers. So each one of us will get one, use 125,000. But we have waterfront walkway, we have vulnerable populations, warming cooling center acknowledgements, H2 here, the education, that we could then take that on as a group knowing that we wouldn't have the guidance. But if we have those 3 to 5 already outlined, they've already led us net to the water, now we just continue to fish. I think I just put
Beautifully
two things
said.
together, thanks.
No, that was exactly, yes.
So leave the horse to water and let him fish.
Let the smart people talk.
No.
Can I touch on the, I agree with you about the, if we have, how many EV chargers?
5 right now.
5 in the town of Bucksport,
And-
none of them fast.
Right.
Okay, and whether they're fast, slow, fast seems to be the one that would work for the tourists coming in.
Yes,
You're talking
And-
hours plural.
exactly.
I guess I just wanna put it out there that I agree that there definitely needs to be more, because you then leverage that tourism money
Mm-hmm.
to enhance our economic base, so you kinda get a chance to double down.
Well, you
My
can look at
point-
it the other way though. If you spend 8 hours in town, you're more apt to spend more money and more time here. If you allow somebody 1 hour, they're going from Augusta to Bucksport to charge 1 hour, finishing their route to Bar Harbor. So there's 2
So
sides.
Rich
to the
wants the slow
story.
chargers.
Bar
Yeah, but
Harbor,
I'm
to
talking
my knowledge, Bar
right.
Harbor has
Banks of them.
Yeah,
fast
yeah.
chargers.
They
Banks
do,
of
okay.
they do.
So
Bar Harbor
they're
has
the
them
destination that people are planning their, how far do I need to go to get where I need to go, because this place has what I need. However, we all know, I owned a lobster shop on Verona. People would come there frequently, and I'd say, where are you headed? Bar Harbor. Can you tell me a good place to go? And I said, I wouldn't go to Bar Harbor. Why? It's because it's 1,000 people fighting for 100 parking spots.
Too
Oh, yeah.
congested.
Yeah.
So
Is that right?
In a nutshell, I
Got
said
that
there's
right.
far better places to visit than Bar Harbor, in my opinion.
But
Like,
we,
Fine.
okay, when the Friars went down, we lost a huge incentive for tourists to take the left when they're coming to Bar Harbor.
exactly.
Bottom line, that thing drew a crowd.
Yep.
People
Sure did.
came to check out the guys on the road, to get the beer and hear the French and all
I
that
do
good
just
stuff.
want to acknowledge the fact that we have 3 minutes left in our planned time here. And I would love to hear about the Friars after that. But, yes,
I'd be happy to summarize a couple notes that I've
thank
taken.
you.
The walkway raising, the warming, cooling, emergency space, communication systems during an emergency, the education and outreach, watershed and water quality.
Mhm.
Now, that just happens to be 5 things. I think you were looking for about 5
3 to
things.
5.
Those are the things that I've heard us discuss. To me, they sound like a decent selection of things that we could work on, both in the near term and in the longer term.
With a consensus also.
Right.
And there's at least some of us that like many of these.
I think also building off of
very nice.
what people have said, and thank you for sharing that, that maybe moving forward beyond this grant, something larger to discuss and engage with separately is the economy of Bucksport and how that's related to EVs, tourism, etc. I'm not, in terms of my understanding of the 72 actions, I'm not seeing big ones that stand out that could really help achieve those goals in the time period that we have, and I don't personally think necessarily appeal to the building resilience aspect that the grant is allotted for. So yes, those 5 sound great. I definitely agree that those are things that we all discussed and in some capacity are important to everybody. Again, acknowledging the time, they don't at this moment have exact like actions or strategies attached to them, but are very easily attachable to actions and strategies that are on the list. So maybe something that could be done between this meeting and next meeting is going off of those 5 agreed upon actions, if that's what we want to do, and exploring what strategies best apply to those 5
How we can fit
priorities.
those into
Alright, so a little quick,
Exactly.
just a little quick Google thing. Airbnb is partnering with a company to put grants to give Airbnbs, we all know, we all have a lot of Airbnbs around here.
Mhm.
So Airbnb is already working to solve some of these problems with partnering with the government and some of their money that's coming out, part of the $7 billion. So that might be something to put out there to the Airbnbs in town, like, hey, there's money out there to put a fast charger at your Airbnb because that will bring more business. So that's just a quick little, that might help
Yeah.
solve a problem.
Yeah.
Definitely
I think so.
something for a future
I think that's it.
economic board to
Yeah.
consider.
Could you repeat the 5, Ralph? 'Cause
Yes.
Sherry
Thank
didn't
you.
catch it.
Sure.
I was thinking about my dinner.
But
Um,
yeah, we do have a hard stop at 7, so trying to.
Walkway raising the walkway and things related to that. The second was the warming, cooling, or emergency space. The communication systems during an emergency. The education outreach and engagement, and the watershed concerns, regional watershed concerns and water quality, which could deal with runoff, stormwater, drinking water, landfill, leachate, that kind of thing.
And I think those are great because they also all address, I think, vulnerable and priority populations within the community to some extent. Okay.
And they tie really well into our last meeting and the concerns that people brought up.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. For doing that.
I think we should go through that list again, maybe just in our minds reorganize
Right.
what can we do still, what lines up with these 5 things that there seems to be agreement with, and just sort of organize it in our brains for the sake of a future meeting.
Definitely. That is not a hard stop by any means.
Yeah.
I would say a launching point for where we'll move next.
Just to go towards like getting a solid,
Definitely.
actionable list.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll, did we want to set a date for the next meeting, or what should our next steps be, Ainsley? Guide us.
That's a great
Please.
question. I'm leaving for a month next week, so I might not be the best person to ask. I guess my first question would be how near in the future are people?
How long is the grant again for? Is it 6 months? December? I'm trying to remember. I can work on
I
it
would
now.
assume that sometime in the next 2 weeks would be ideal for a follow-up meeting.
One of our members, who's not here tonight, thought Wednesdays was her best day.
That's right.
And the rest of us are here and it's a Wednesday. I don't know if we're missing anyone else, but 2 weeks from today.
Would
Does that-
be the 26th.
Does that likely work?
I think that would work.
Hopefully Alan can be here. The 26th, is that agreed upon?
That sounds good to
We
me.
already had a date for the 26th, I think. Alan might have
Perfect.
like preempted
Yeah, he
that.
might have done that
Yeah,
ahead of time.
I think I have it
Okay.
in my calendar for the
Perfect.
26th. Yeah,
Okay. Beautiful.
I'll confirm with him that if he can make it for that day.
So, have we already reached our hard stop?
Well, it was a little hard to know when to do it, but I'll do
Have
it.
we reached, okay.
Yeah, yeah, you can.
I don't want to be mayor.
No, you're good. All right, thank you, everybody.
So now that we've reached our hard